palace was always too quiet in the morning, servants whispered. Doors slid open without sound. Even the birds seemed afraid to sing too loud. But the apothecary room was never truly silent. Inside there was the sound of grinding stone, the soft snap of dried stems, the sharp scent of vinegar mixed with crushed roots. She liked it that way. She worked alone, by choice. Most people avoided her room. It smelled too strong. The light was dim, and she didn't smile. She didn't need. She was there to fix things, not to be liked. Burns, headaches, coughs, bleeding that wouldn't stop. She handled it all without asking questions, without flattery, without fear. That made some people uneasy, but others watched her. One morning, as she was sorting dried herbs, the door opened. No knock, no warning. She didn't look up. "State your injury," she said. There was a pause. Then a low voice replied, "I'm not hurt." She glanced at him and immediately stopped moving. He was wearing a blue robe, deep, dark blue, the color only worn by high-ranking officials or royals. But he had no escort, no seal, no introduction, just a sharp gaze and a faint scar near his left eye. "I came to ask about a plant," he said calmly. She stared at him. "You don't look like a man who asks." His lips twitched, but he didn't smile. "I don't," he agreed. "But I was told you know more than the royal physicians." She raised an eyebrow. "That depends on the question." He pulled something from his sleeve, a folded cloth. Inside a small black seed, round, smooth, unfamiliar. She picked it up carefully, sniffed it, touched it to her tongue, then looked back at him. "Where did this come from?" "You don't need to know." "Then I don't need to answer." He watched her for a moment, then said quietly, "It was found in the cup of a man who died yesterday." She set the seed down. "Poison," she said, "fast. Causes confusion, then stops the heart." His face didn't change, but something behind his eyes tightened. "Can you prove it?" "No," she said, "but I know." He nodded once, picked up the cloth, tucked it back into his sleeve, then turned to leave. She thought he was gone. But just before stepping out, he paused, then asked, without turning his head, "What do you think of people who kill without leaving a trace?" She looked at his back, his broad shoulders, the tension in his hands, then said, "I think they're either cowards or kings." He stood there for a second longer, then walked away. She didn't know his name, but after that morning, she started seeing blue at the edge of her vision everywhere she went. He came again the next day. This time, he didn't speak. He just stood in the doorway as she sorted herbs, the shadow of his robe spilling across the floor like spilled ink. She ignored him. At least, she tried. But her hands moved slower. Her breath shortened. He was watching her, not in the way men usually watched women. There was no hunger in his gaze, no softness. He was watching the way her fingers picked through the dried plants, how she measured without needing to look, how she sniffed a single leaf and knew exactly what it was. Finally, she said, without turning, Do you always stare at people like that? There was a pause. Then, only when I'm trying to understand them. She kept working. And I haven't yet. That afternoon, a guard brought a message, a sealed paper. No name, no mark. Inside, a question written in tight, neat letters. If someone were poisoned with a water-based compound, how would you detect it? No signature. But she already knew. She didn't answer. But she left a small pouch outside her door the next morning. Inside, a mix of powder that would turn dark green when touched by certain poisons. Easy to hide, easy to use. The pouch was gone before noon. Later that week, she passed him in the corridor. He was standing beside a pillar, speaking to a high-ranking noble. But as she walked by, his eyes flicked toward her. Only for a second. But it was enough. He saw her. And he wanted her to know it. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay on her side, listening to the wind tapping gently against the window frame. Her hands still smelled like mugwort. Her robe still carried the sharpness of vinegar from cleaning bowls and jars. She hated men like him, powerful, silent, always playing a game no one else was invited to. But she couldn't stop thinking about the scar near his eye, or how his voice never rushed, or how he asked her questions no one else dared to ask. The next morning, he showed up again. This time, he brought something. A sealed jar. "Smell this," he said. She opened it. Inhaled. Sharp. Rotten sweet. Almost metallic. "Rhododendron," she said. "Toxic if prepared wrong." He nodded. A maid collapsed after drinking tea. They blamed the cook. "She's innocent," she said. He tilted his head. "How do you know?" "Because you wouldn't be here if you thought she was guilty." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. But not quite. That night, she found something left on her workbench. A single camellia. Fresh. White. No note. She stared at it for a long time, then placed it in a small jar of water beside her lamp. She didn't smile, but something in her chest softened. She had never been called beyond the outer court. Apothecaries like her weren't meant to step into the royal quarters. That space was for higher physicians, those with titles, with spotless robes, with names. But one morning, just after sunrise, a court lady came to her door. "You are to bring your tools. A patient is waiting." The woman didn't say where. She didn't have to. The red cord on her sleeve told everything. Inner palace. No explanations, no questions. So Hua packed quickly, scalpels, herbs, glass jars, a pouch of ground pearl powder, and her silence. The path to the royal quarters was longer than she expected. Clean. Bright. Watched. She passed through 3 gates. At each one, a guard checked her face. No one told her who she would be treating. No one told her what happened. But she knew one thing the moment she stepped into the private chamber. He was already there. The man in blue, sitting near the window, watching. The patient was a court lady, unconscious, her skin flushed, her lips pale. A tray beside her bed held a half-finished bowl of soup, a silver spoon, and a white handkerchief stained with red. Poison. Subtle. Delayed. Meant not to kill quickly, but to ruin slowly. So Hua worked fast. She asked no permission. She opened the court lady's mouth, touched her pulse, smelled her breath, scraped her tongue with a thin stick. Then she spoke. Lead, mixed with rice wine. Someone boiled the clay pot too long. A physician in the corner stepped forward. Offended. You assume too much. She didn't even look at him. I don't assume, she said. I know. Then, for the first time since entering, she turned to the man in blue. She needs charcoal, a full purge, then ginger soaked in warm water. He gave a single nod. No argument, no praise, just trust. When she finished, the guards led her to a side room to rest, but she knew what it really was. Observation. They wanted to see if she would speak, if she would gossip, if she would act too impressed by silk and silence. She said nothing. She waited, and hours later he came in. He didn't speak at first. He stood near the door, arms folded. Then finally, you were right. She's recovering. So Hua didn't look up. That's my job, I know. Then, after a long pause, he added, not many people speak like you do. She glanced at him. Because not many listen like you do. His gaze held hers for a breath longer than it should have. Then he stepped closer. Do you want to know who she was? No, she said. Why not? Because the more I know, she said, the less safe I become. He watched her carefully, then softer. You're already not safe. That night, she found another flower on her table. This time, a dried sprig of mugwort wrapped in clean cloth. Beside it, a short message in careful handwriting. For sleep. You'll need it. No name. She didn't need one. She thought things would return to normal, but they didn't. After the night in the inner palace, the guards bowed lower when she passed. Servants whispered when she entered a room. And worse, her workroom was no longer quiet. Gifts began to appear. Silk pouches, strange teas, inkstones far too expensive for someone of her rank. She returned them all except one. A folded paper. Fan, plain white, with only one mark on it. A small blue brushstroke, in the shape of a wave. She kept it hidden in a drawer, but she found herself reaching for it more than she meant to. The man in blue didn't return for 5 days. When he did, he looked tired. His voice was rough. Another death, he said. Same signs, same poison. She felt cold. Who? A palace musician. So Hua pressed her lips together. You think it's the same person? I don't know. But you want me to find out? He didn't answer, which meant yes. She visited the kitchen first, then the musicians' quarters, then the well. She spoke to no one. She touched nothing. She simply listened and smelled. She found the scent again, faint, bitter, under a stack of old bowls, fermented wild pear, not dangerous by itself, but mixed with the right oil, lethal. She returned that night to find him waiting by the herb racks. You were followed, he said. She didn't flinch. I know. He stepped closer. Too close. You shouldn't have gone alone. I don't answer to you, she said quietly. No, he replied. But I keep choosing you anyway. Her breath caught. He looked at her for a long time, then softer. You're not just clever. You're brave. That's the problem. She turned away. Her hands moved automatically, reaching for the tea jar. Something to hold. Something familiar. You never tell me who you are, she said. He didn't respond. You ask questions. You send me into danger, but you never answer anything. He walked toward the door and then paused. Without turning around, he said, Because if I tell you, you'll have to choose a side. She looked at him, really looked, and asked, What if I already did? He didn't move, but she saw his fingers clench slightly at his side. Then he left. That night she couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because she could still feel the weight of his words in the air. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew. The man in blue was not just searching for the truth. He was protecting it, even if it meant breaking her heart. She woke to footsteps outside her room. Not loud. Not fast, just wrong. She got up quietly, barefoot, and opened her door a crack. A scroll had been left at her doorstep. No seal, no ribbon, just ink. One word written in soft, fluid handwriting. Leave. She didn't. She boiled water, crushed herbs, and waited. When he came, later than usual, he didn't speak. His hair was damp from the rain, his robe darker than normal, the blue almost black. She poured him tea. He sat. Then finally said, They know you're helping me. She nodded. I found the last ingredient, she replied. Blackthorn oil, hidden in the lacquer jars in the calligraphy room. He didn't look surprised. He just stared at the tea in his hands. They're going to move against the queen, he said quietly. At the next offering ceremony, she drinks first. So-Hwa felt her chest go still. How many people know? Too many. And not enough. He looked at her, eyes tired, voice low. I wasn't supposed to care what happened, just watch, report, obey. She met his gaze. And now? Now I care. Silence, not the peaceful kind. The kind that presses against your ribs like a storm waiting to break. She stood, walked to her shelf, picked up a small wooden box and opened it. Inside, 2 sealed packets, one marked in red. For purification, she said. You'll put it in the queen's tea before it's served. He stared at the packet, then looked at her. You're not just clever, he said again. You're dangerous. You made me that way. He stepped closer. Not too close, but enough for her to smell the rain on his sleeves, the faint spice behind his usual scent. He raised his hand slowly, stopped just before touching her cheek. I've never told you my name, he said. She nodded, once. I noticed. He let out a breath, then whispered, It's Jimin. She froze. Not because the name was familiar, but because saying it out loud meant one thing. He wasn't hiding anymore. Jimin. She repeated it in her mind. Jimin. The man who never flinched. The man who watched everything. The man who left flowers and walked like silence itself He had given her his name. And now, her hands, the ones that used to only smell like mugwort and medicine, felt warm and afraid. The next day, she received her official summons. She would assist with preparing tea for the offering ceremony, front court, royal presence. No escape. The courtyard was too quiet. Banners fluttered, drums beat softly. Servants moved in perfect rhythm. But the air was wrong. Too still. Too tense. Sohwa stood behind a long table, rows of teacups waiting. Bowls of crushed herbs. The heat from the charcoal pot made her palms sweat. And her heart was loud, louder than the drums, louder than the wind. Jimin hadn't come. Or maybe he had, but was already hidden, watching from behind a carved screen or shadowed post. She didn't. No. She only knew the queen would arrive soon, and so would the poison. When the tray was brought to her, the one meant for the queen, she paused. Not long, just enough. The head court lady narrowed her eyes. Is something wrong? No, Sohwa replied softly, but her hand slipped beneath the table. Just for a second. And the red-marked packet disappeared into the steeping bowl. The herbal purifier dissolved in silence, and the tea turned clear. She passed the tray. Stepped, back, bowed her head, and waited. The queen lifted the cup. Everyone else held their breath. She drank, a slow sip. A moment passed. Then another. Nothing. No shaking. No gasping. No fall. Only a calm blink and a gentle sigh. The queen turned to the side and spoke to a waiting noble. Behind her, 3 other men began to shift, barely. But Sohwa saw it, the flicker of panic, the realization that something had failed. And in that moment, Jimin stepped forward. He was dressed in white, plain, clean, but his voice was the blade. These men planned to poison Her Majesty. Gasps rippled. Sohwa stared. He had spoken, out loud, in front of everyone. And then he looked at her, not with fear, not with regret, but with something close to peace. The arrests were quick, but the rumors would last forever. Some said a secret agent of the court had saved the queen. Some whispered about a strange apothecary who could smell lies in tea leaves. But the truth never made it into the records. Only silence. Days passed. Then, weeks. Sohwa's workroom returned to normal. Mostly. She still boiled water, still crushed herbs, still folded her sleeves exactly 3 times before starting. But now, every morning, there was something else. A single camellia. Left quietly on the window ledge, always fresh, always white, and sometimes, if she stood still enough, she could smell him in the breeze. Sandalwood, rain, blue ink, Jimin. She never asked for more, because in a palace like this, even the smallest scent of love was enough to change a life. The end.